Hey Geektopians, what's up? I'm Sean Luke and welcome to a brand new episode of the Geektopians. If you're new here to the show, we like to talk about topics that are interesting, informative, and somewhat different from the norm. But first, I've got to make this grand announcement. We are back here in 2021. We're gonna have a brand new set and look at this brand new shirt. Look at this brand new set. I'm pumped, I'm psyched. Let's go, let's get on with the show. And today, we're gonna talk about the effects of COVID in the film industry. So, let's get to it. As you know, 2020 was a crazy year with the global pandemic really stripping life away from everybody and everything. Even the movie and TV industry was not immune to it. With the bombshell announcements back in October that AMC and Regal were closing all their US theaters, and the fact that now big movie companies are starting to rely on more streaming options. It seems like going to the movies for dates, hangouts, or family outings are becoming a thing of the past. But is it? Or is this just a temporary measure for the new normal? So everything was going well for movies in the beginning of 2020. We saw Bad Boys 3, Sonic the Hedgehog, 1917, Jumanji 2, and we had high hopes for seeing big blockbuster movies like Black Widow, Wonder Woman 84, James Bond's No Time to Die, personal favorite, and the 299th installment of the Fast and Furious franchise, and so much more. But then in March, that's when the COVID nation attacked. This global pandemic, originally isolated, spread rapidly in the United States, with New York City specifically being one of the epicenters, then followed by California, and then the rest of the country. All non-essential businesses were closing down. This included the movie theaters and Broadway shows, as they had high potential for becoming super spreader events. Movie productions themselves were pausing, and we had to wait to see some of our favorite movies, for the most part, until next year. Not to mention, companies themselves like MGM back in April had to cut about 7%, which is about 60 jobs from those in the TV and film sections. Now, don't get me wrong. The movie industry is no stranger for having its ups and downs, especially when it comes to the health and safety of its actors, production teams, etc. But in this case, however, due to the difficulties of what's happening around the world, companies now had to rely on existing but overlooked resources or newer solutions, including virtual and streaming options. This is so that they can try and recoup any revenue normally coming from traditional box office gains for all projected losses due to closing of the theaters. Here's a perfect example. In April, Universal had decided that it was going to release Trolls World Tour directly to video on demand and not go to the movie theaters at all. This led to a huge backlash from AMC and then later Regal Theaters when they sent an open letter denouncing what Universal was doing and taking action by effectively cutting ties with the studios. It really didn't help either cinema's case when the movie made over $100 million over the first 3 weeks of release on multiple streaming platforms, according to Universal. Then, in October of 2020, AMC and Regal announced that they had strong financial crisis, even with AMC saying that they could run out of money by the end of 2020 or early 2021, therefore effectively closing all of their theaters. Regal Cinemas themselves announced that they were already closing all 536 theaters in the United States. They were citing that due to the complications in New York alone and the fact that there was no clear guidance regarding reopening, that they had no choice but to announce the closures of all of their cinemas. They did try their best to regain losses, but the Rona Nation got the better of them. The movie Tenet decided to defy the odds and open up during the midst of the pandemic under the hopes that people would go to the theaters to have some semblance of normalcy. Now, I can't argue with them. I'm a person who loves the movie experience. I, too, would have loved to go to the movie theaters, buy that overly expensive popcorn and soda, side piece of pretzel bites, and enjoy that big screen experience. Unfortunately, a lot of individuals, including myself, felt that staying home was a lot safer than going to the movie theaters. And as a result, the movie underperformed greatly. The movie only made domestically $57 million, which was very little considering it was a big budget film having a production budget of $205 million. Internationally, though, it did better with $300 million, but that's on a global scale. Now, this and a few other movie engagements opened up the industry's eyes and saw that as long as this crisis is upon us, there'll be a large drop in attendance from moviegoers. This revelation also resulted in more companies looking into video on demand and streaming services to help engage the large at-home audience still seeking the demand for entertainment. Studios started releasing certain big-name movies in the hopes that possibly making money back. Some have succeeded, like Bill and Ted Face the Music and Scoob. However, one example of a risky endeavor not paying off was actually Disney's Mulan. Disney has been well known for being a media juggernaut over the recent years. Avengers Endgame became one of the most profitable movies of all time. So it's only imaginable that Disney took a big hit when they announced that none of their Marvel movies were going to be released in 2020, coupled with the fact that Onward immediately went on to their video-on-demand direct streaming service, Disney Plus, after only spending a few weeks in the theaters. So for them to try and recoup losses, it didn't come as a shock that when Disney decided that they were going to put Mulan on Disney Plus as a pay extra option, also known as Premier Access. Now, Disney Plus has actually been a bright spot for much needed increased demand for entertainment following the rise of home viewership due to the COVID restrictions, providing new content such as the aforementioned Onward, Hamilton, The Return of the Mandalorian, and WandaVision's current success, just to name a few. However, fans were not happy about the change because they have other subscription services that put out new movies and TV shows all the time, like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. I can go on, that didn't have an extra paywall. But it was a risk since this was the first time the company wanted to test their new Premier Access option. This was under the hopes that if this was indeed a success, following the classic methods of pay-per-view on cable, then it would follow with other big-name movies. However, when Mulan came out, despite its favorable reviews, it seemed like other outside factors contributed to the dissuasion of paying for a controversial movie and did not get enough traction to warrant the extra $30 fee you had to pay to watch the film. Now, the bad part about all this is we don't know exactly how much the movie actually pulled in. Why, you ask? Let me explain. Box office receipts and sales that come from movie theaters and DVD sales later on was the best way to know how well a movie did financially. That's how we know that Avengers Endgame made over $1 billion plus dollars. It's also how we know how movies are considered bombs, like Dolittle. Video on demand services have no such tracking yet, mainly because the movie industries didn't really see video on demand service as a big deal, dating back to 2012 when this first actually started becoming a big thing. And the problem with that is movies are disseminated through video on demand through various companies like Comcast, Spectrum, PlayStation, Xbox, etc. It's very hard to keep track of every single amount of earnings that comes in unless it's done directly through the studios themselves. And as a result of that, the studios can just give out a general number. Like with Trolls World Tour, when they were talking about how they made $100 million within the first 3 weeks of sale. By not releasing the box office sales of the movie, it may take away from the incentive that a movie is considered a success or a bust. But you know what? I don't consider this a bad thing. Huh? What we are now learning about and actually gauging is growing subscription numbers. Even through the growth of VOD movies, consumers can dictate where a movie can go and see the number of subscribers rise based on whatever service can provide the best content. It is also providing an option that if you want to have different avenues for viewing certain movies, it's now possible. One good example of that is going into 2021. Warner Brothers Media made the recent announcement that they were going to simultaneously show all of their big movies under their HBO Max streaming service while simultaneously releasing them in theaters. This is amazing, because this shows two things. One, it shows that the movie industry isn't exactly dead. There are companies that still hold hope that theaters will open up and that the old ways will come back. But two, this also shows that we are moving in a different, more digital direction where it's possible people would rather cautiously stay home and watch a movie with their friends and family than go to the movie theater. The next possible step with this would be, and I know you're going to cringe, it's actually virtual reality. Right now, those who actually have virtual reality goggles, you understand that there are apps that are out there that you can sit down in a theater area and watch something on a screen. This could be something that can be even bigger later on down the line. Here's another thing. It seems that animation is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. But you know what? I'm going to talk about that in my next episode. I have not stressed this enough. I love going to the movies. I've always loved it. I've always cherished the experience. But unfortunately, due to what's going on around us, it just wasn't possible. Either theaters refused to open, or the states mandated that they cannot open, or they're just going out of business. It was a tough, devastating break for everybody. But for every downfall, there is a phoenix rising above the rubble. Recently, it was announced that a small independent movie theaters got a major boost from the government to keep their employees ready in case there comes a time where theaters across the country can open up for everyone. AMC recently announced that despite the shortcomings, they have acquired enough revenue to no longer declare bankruptcy. And as of this taping, the green light has been given for theaters to open up in New York City under 25% capacity. That's great. To conclude, the growth and explosion of video on demand and subscription services was something that was of a slow burn, but much like anything to do with technology at first. But because of what's going on, we are now in a better position to bring movies, TV shows, comic books, and every single different form of media without you having to even leave your house. I do hope we go back to the old ways, especially with the vaccine coming out, giving hope for this pandemic to end. But until then, at least we know that the future, from my perspective at least, is looking more and more like our old sci-fi books wanted us to be. This is Sean Luke. I hope you guys are socially distanced from strangers, but close to your friends and family in spirit. Stay strong, be healthy, and I cannot wait to see all y'all Geektopians again. Until then, quarantine and prosper.